Hello, everybody. Welcome to the August 2021 webinar in our Conn Maciel's OSHA webinar series. I normally would say that this is the 8th webinar in our annual series, but given the word I'm trying not to use, although I'm sure I'll use at some point the C word, also known as COVID-19, we've done a number of programs. Obviously, if you've been joining us previously with previous programs this year on COVID, I know hopefully many of you, if not most of you, joined us for our annual kickoff webinar looking at 2020 year in review and forecasting ahead for 2021. We did a bonus forecasting webinar. I think it was just last month or so. Kind of assessing what we've seen in the first 6 to 7 months of the Biden administration with OSHA. Obviously, there's a ton going on, and we're watching it all. And if you all are as busy as we have been the last few weeks since the CDC reversed course and OSHA issued its new guidance, you all are probably just scrambling and trying to keep your heads above water. So this program, I think, comes at an interesting time then, when we're talking about OSHA's voluntary protection programs, sort of the best of the best, that recognition that the agency accords to employers that it concludes that it is doing safety and health the right way in an exemplary fashion. We're going to talk to you about what are the types of recognition programs that are out there, both under VPP as well as some of the other cooperative programs. Could go over some statistics, get into how you qualify, how you might get bounced out of the program, pros and cons of the program, and a number of other considerations. And why I think this is interesting timing, obviously, is most, if not all of you, are probably struggling simply to keep up with the changing rules, requirements, guidance, vaccine mandates that are popping up in various cities, dealing with COVID. If you're lucky enough to be in a good position with respect to the pandemic, then you've got your day-to-day safety concerns. And so how do you find time? Is it worth finding time to pursue recognition through these programs? And hopefully by the end of this program, you'll have a better handle of what type of programs are out there, whether it makes sense for you now or in the future to pursue recognition through those programs. And if you do, how to go about doing that. And if you get in, what you need to think about as far as staying in. So with that, I'll let my colleague and partner in safety, Kate McMahon, introduce herself. Then we'll finish the introductions and get going.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here again on one of our webinars. I will take very little time here to provide an introduction, other than to say that yeah, I've been practicing in this field for many, many years. My background is sort of runs the full gamut of the practice of OSHA law. I certainly have handled many inspections and enforcement actions on a national level. But I also have a lot of experience on the rulemaking side. I've been involved in most of OSHA's major chemical rulemakings over the last decades. We'll leave it at that, so I don't identify my age here. And work obviously very closely with our clients on a daily basis on compliance counseling. We do a lot of very creative and proactive counseling, working with our clients to develop risk assessment programs, hazard identification programs, and provide guidance on a daily basis, which is what I love doing. So I'll leave it at that for now. I'm very happy to be talking about OSHA's VPP program. I'm a pretty big fan, and I'm going to turn it over now to Lindsay DeSalvo, who is also going to speak to us today about the VPP program. Lindsay?
Thanks, Kate. So good afternoon, everyone. As Kate said, my name is Lindsay DeSalvo, and I'm an associate at Conn Maciel Carey in both the firm's OSHA and safety practice and the employment and labor practice. And in my role, working in the OSHA practice, I represent employers in inspections and investigations conducted by OSHA. I have experience working with clients in addressing issues that come up related to either VPP applications or VPP participation and meeting the numerous requirements that are established to be a participant in the VPP program. And then, I also counsel employers on issues like that, as well as other compliance issues related to health and safety. And I will turn it over to Aaron to do a little introduction of himself as well.
Thanks, Lindsay. And like Kate, I've been doing this in the multiple decades. This would be my third decade in which I've been practicing as a management side OSHA and employment lawyer, although it's pretty much largely as an OSHA lawyer. I run the firm's Chicago office where I lead our Midwest OSHA practice. And like every other OSHA lawyer at our firm, handle all aspects of OSHA, from managing inspections, defending citations, litigating in front of the commission, to the proactive auditing and policy design and review. Obviously, what we're talking about today really is, again, more on that latter part, the proactive piece. It seems like it comes up a lot, at least with some of the clients that I work with, either during the middle of an inspection that is posing some challenges, or after significant citations have been issued, and then someone suggests, well, maybe we can propose entry into VPP as part of our settlement, that we're going to proceed down that path. And I can tell you, typically, at least the experience that I have in those situations is, or the response that I get is, well, we might not want to get ahead of ourselves, is what OSHA will say. If you're here with a significant citation package, maybe VPP is not yet in your grasp. But we'll get into that and kind of some of those other considerations. Like I said, just quick review of the agenda. I think I already covered some of these, gave you a little bit of preview, but I'm going to start talking about what is VPP, the types of recognition programs within VPP. Then Kate is going to talk about the pros and cons of participating in the programs. Lindsay's going to talk about the criteria for entry, as well as renewal within the program. I'll briefly talk about kind of how politics impacts VPP entry, as well as potentially removal. And I think then we'll cover at the end the SHARP and some other cooperative programs. So what is VPP? I think it helps to kind of talk about when it began. Like many things that fall on arguably the more kind of progressive side, it actually began as an experimental program in California back in 1979. In 1982, about 3 years later, it was when federal OSHA formally announced its VPP programs and approved the first site. Then about 16 years later, federal work sites also became eligible to participate in the program. So if you've been in an OSHA area office, you may have seen a plaque or a sign on the wall that this area office is recognized as a VPP site. Obviously, if you work in a manufacturing facility or a logistics facility, maybe you might kind of chuckle to yourself that, yeah, it's a lot easier for a professional kind of white collar site like an OSHA office to make it into VPP. Obviously, though, it's employees, it's compliance officers are going into dangerous environments or hazardous environments, and so there's actually is a fair amount of work that goes into ensuring that they can qualify for recognition as well. And so as I said, what does that recognition look like? The goal or the purpose in developing this program from OSHA's perspective is to promote effective worksite-based safety and health programs that reflect a collaboration or cooperative effort between management. So I assume that's our audience. That's all of you listening today, the folks at OSHA who are going to assess and approve, as well then as to the extent you have unions, labor. Obviously, if you've gone through inspections, you know typically a labor representative participates in the inspection. They're invited to participate in the informal conference. They're literally given a seat at the table and a voice in the outcome. And it's no different with respect to VPP programs. What the agency then is going to be looking for is, it's not just a matter of a good safety record. Obviously you can have, we tend to believe that the folks that have good safety records get there through good policies, good training, good auditing, good practices. But that whether that's kind of by, a result of culture, hard work, maybe a little bit of luck. What OSHA then looks for in terms of admission into these programs is to have basically all those elements formalized into a safety and health management system. Again, I talk a lot about resolutions. Kate mentioned in her introduction about creative solutions. Many times, in significant cases, OSHA will ask for or propose as part of a settlement that a company adopt a comprehensive safety and health management system as part of a settlement agreement. And one of the things that I will always say when counseling clients about that consideration is, are you ready to do that? Is that a commitment that you may be willing to do it, but can you meet those goals? Once you have that program, can you do the auditing? Can you do the inspecting? And so I think essentially the same questions need to be asked when you're considering entry into VPP. It's more than just that plaque on the wall. There's a lot of work that goes into it. Another question that we get: where does the authority come for VPP? Obviously, from its Section 2B(1) of the OSHA Act. The larger goal, obviously, for one of OSHA's primary goals is to assure. And this is from the statute. So far as possible, that every working man and woman in the nation has a safe and healthful working conditions, and to preserve the agency's human resources. And the intent is to do that, quote, by encouraging employers and employees in their efforts to reduce the number of occupational safety and health hazards at their places of employment, and to stimulate employers and employees to institute new and to perfect existing programs. So again, it's really a program-based program, but it's a program that has all those programmatic elements that really are intended to promote and enhance safety and health at your work sites. So how does the program work? The agency, OSHA, sets a variety of performance-based criteria for the health and safety system. Employers then, when they believe they're ready, are invited to apply. And at that point, OSHA will assess the applicants against the criteria. And it's a pretty rigorous process, as we're going to get into. The various professionals, some of whom are volunteers from other companies that have very solid and recognized safety programs. And then based on the assessment that is done, OSHA will hopefully approve a qualified site to enter into one of the three programs that you see here, either the STAR program, merit, or demonstration. And so STAR is recognition for employers that demonstrate exemplary achievement in the prevention and control of workplace safety and health hazards, in developing, implementing, and that really, I think, perhaps the most important element, continuous improvement. So it's not that you create a great program and implement it, but then obviously you're continuing, evaluating it, assessing it, finding where there are opportunities for improvement, and then making those improvements. Merit program is the next level. That involves recognition for employers that have developed and implemented a good safety and health management system, but from the perspective of the folks doing the assessment, still need to take additional steps to reach that STAR quality level. And then demonstration is a recognition program or status for employers that are operating effective safety and health management systems that differ for whatever reason from current VPP requirements, and being placed into the demonstration category is OSHA's way of testing, if you will, the efficacy of those different approaches. So you can see it's sort of kind of like a ladder or steps. I use the phrase, you've got to learn to walk before you can run. So if you don't have a comprehensive safety and health program, if you have some opportunities for improvement, you're probably not going to shoot for star admission or acceptance into star right off the bat. Maybe you aim for merit. That's an achievable goal. Set a target for how long and what you need to do to get there. Once you're in, then you can work through the program, hopefully, to then move up that ladder and be approved for entry into the STAR program. And there are a number of 3 different primary ways to participate in these programs, either as site-based, as part of a mobile workforce, or at the VPP corporate level. And I think those categories essentially are what they sound like, right? So what is site-based participation? That is the acceptance either through the owner of a single site, or site officials who control operations at a particular site. This can include private sector, any sort of fixed work site, warehouse, manufacturing facilities, chemical facilities. In general industry and maritime, it can also apply to construction work sites or projects, but these are big projects. You would need to have been in operation at that site for at least 12 months at the time that you're approved, and would have to expect to continue in operation for another 12 months at that site. There are also opportunities for federal sector fixed work sites to be entered, as well as resident contractors that are working at participating VPP sites. And so there would be the opportunity for that contractor to also achieve some form of recognition. As far as the mobile work site, what does that look like? Similarly, as you might imagine, it deals with contractors or subcontractors who may not have authority for safety and health for an entire work site, but also for those companies that have employees that move site to site, such as specialty trade contractors, repair, maintenance, things along those lines. And then VPP corporate, I think, really is kind of the high level in terms of it's when a company is going for recognition based on, and these are typically very large corporations that have been able to adopt VPP on a very large scale. And to meet the entry into this level, the applicant would have to have established and standardized corporate level safety and health systems, and effectively implemented them on an organization-wide basis, as well as having that internal screening and auditing processes to ensure that all of their facilities are going through that continual assessment and continuous improvement approach. So then just wanted to run through some slides with statistics that come from OSHA to just give you all a sense of kind of the scope of these programs, as you can see here. And this is in federal OSHA states. VPP kind of reached its zenith, if you will, around 2010, when it had 1,720 members. You can see a fairly gradual and consistent increase from 1982, as I said, when OSHA recognized and admitted its first sites, fairly gradual, and then some significant increases between essentially 1998 and 2008. And then it's sort of leveled off. It dropped a little bit towards the end of the Obama administration, and it's hovered right in that 1,300 or so range for the past 4 to 5 years. The size of VPP sites, I think this is interesting, and this is by the number that you see on the bottom times 100. So the majority, in the federal states, the majority of sites, or the largest number of sites in one category, would be those that are 100 employees or fewer. And then as the larger you get, really, by and large, the fewer number of sites that you see. As far as what is the types of participants, overwhelming number is within the STAR program. There's a smaller handful of merit-based participants. Well, I think this slide is one of the more interesting ones as far as the number of sites by region. So clearly, Region 6 is much more, I guess, welcoming or believes in the VPP model. Here in Region 5, where I sit, which includes Chicago and Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, we're second, but we're still pretty far off of Region 6, as you can see from this slide. Region 6 has over 500 members within VPP. As far as and that you look then at the states distribution of federal OSHA states with number of VPP sites. Here in Illinois, we've got 82. You have a good number in Louisiana at 98. Ohio has a solid number at 102, 103 in Pennsylvania, which would be Region 3. But then Texas, far and away, really essentially triples anybody else, does triple any other state with over 300 member companies or member employers. As far as and I think you could probably then put 2 and 2 together when you look at the next slide, the industry with the most, again, almost double, the next closest industry with the number of members would be the chemical industry. And that makes sense, right? I mean, when you're dealing with hazardous chemicals, when you're assuming you're subject to the process safety standard, which already imposes significantly greater requirements as far as management of change and things like that, and having those processes and programs in place, in my view, it logically follows, and it's not at all surprising that chemical companies, which place a premium and great value on safety and health compliance, are more likely perhaps to seek and be granted admission to the VPP programs. And I think it also similarly follows as far as the utilities. You're working with electrical power, transmission and generating equipment and lines. You obviously, again, need to have excellent safety and health programs and procedures. And so I think when you couple or when you group the utilities, petroleum and chemical industries, there's the lion's share of your VPP members. This slide, probably not much a surprise that over 3/4 of the companies within the federal OSHA universe that are in VPP are non-union. Those of us that I know Lindsay mentioned that she does labor and employment in addition to OSHA, as have I. Obviously, one of the main reasons that many employers prefer to remain union-free is that they feel that they have a greater degree of control over and ability to make changes in their workplace. So it's not terribly surprising that the majority of sites that are in VP are non-union. That said, if you have a good relationship with your union, I recently have been on inspections where the union representative could not have been more helpful, more of a cheerleader for the company's safety effort. So when you have a good partnership with your union and you're working together towards safety and health, I believe that only would facilitate and ease your ability to qualify for VPP. So that's my initial portion. I will turn it over to Kate to wax philosophical about the pros and cons of VPP.
I was just beginning to talk about a comment actually on a point you made with some of the slides that you had, and point out that I actually learned something that I did not know today about VPP, which is it's interesting to compare the industry makeup, VPP participant industry composition, with the highest percentage being chemical companies, which does not surprise me, as you said, Erin, with the size composition of VPP participants. That is actually interesting to me. It looks like we have more smaller companies than ultra large companies participating in VPP, yet the industry most active in the VPP program is the chemical industry, which does tend to be made up of larger companies. So just an interesting comment, I think, on the composition of VPP membership. Let me talk for a couple of minutes, if I can, about the pros and cons of being a VPP member. I'm a very large advocate for the program. I think it really helps companies. It forces a company to raise the level of not compliance, because hopefully everyone's in compliance with the OSHA requirements, but raise the level of hazard identification and hazard avoidance. And it's impressive to see companies who start out, good solid companies who are in full compliance with the OSHA regulatory requirements, move from that stage to being VPP members. So I'm a big advocate, and I do think there are a lot of pros associated with it and benefits. One of the biggest and probably most significant to a lot of employers is that you as a VPP member are exempt from routine compliance programmed inspections, obviously not from incident inspections or referrals associated with an accident, but from programmed inspections, which make up about 40% of OSHA's inspection profile. You as a VPP member, get skipped over on the list when your name pops up. So that's a benefit. No one likes going through an OSHA inspection if you're an employer. And so something to keep in mind. Also, and kind of where I started, there really is a market improvement in the level of recognition of hazards and commitment to safety. It is almost inevitable that employee morale and motivation to work safely benefits and increases as not only as VPP members, but when you're working towards a VPP participation, there really has to be a cooperative, genuine, and robust effort between management and employees and their representatives, if the facility's unionized, to work towards the VPP process. So it improves labor management relationships. It develops avenues for employees and employers to communicate over safety in areas where that wasn't happening before. Also, there's certainly, I think the statistics prove that there's an overall reduction in employee injury and illnesses. OSHA indicates that for VPP websites, dark case rates, which is a good indicator of injuries, and something that's a metric able to be used to compare companies within an industry, indicates that VPP work sites have an average dark case risk rate that is 52% below the industry average, which is really a remarkable reduction in DART rates. So that's OSHA's statistic, but I have no reason to question it. And OSHA further indicates that DART rate, that's not just an artifact of a really safe company. It's not just a vicious circle where really, really good, robust safety and health program management companies join VPP, get the status of VPP, but they already had DART rates that were really low. Apparently, DART rates actually are significantly reduced as you become a member of VPP. So a huge benefit. Of course, a corollary to that is you'd have lower workers' comp rates. Your insurance costs would be lower, just overall general profitability of benefits associated with VPP membership. Also, I think another obvious point is stronger safety program, because you're going to have comprehensive evaluation by a team of health and safety consultants, the VPP OSHA consultants, who are analyzing your programs you're analyzing your site for, of course, compliance and beyond compliance, but also analyzing your programs. And that's a big part of getting into VPP. I think Lindsay's going to talk about that in a little bit, but an analysis of your safety and health programs. And it's not just a one and done thing. You know, you are up for renewal every couple of years, so you need to get renewed. And in that process, which is a very rigorous one, there's another analysis by experts at OSHA, not the enforcement folks, but the VPP folks, on the robustness and effectiveness of your programs. So a huge benefit. The last two bullets that are on this slide, if you know, I would sort of put at the very top, because to me, these are among the very greatest benefits associated with VPP membership. And one is networking with government and industry. I have been in untold number of examples where there has been an incident where an employee has been injured at a VPP site. And the first phone call that the company makes is to their VPP contact, because they have solid, good relationships there. And they want to inform them of the incident. They want to, you know, work with them to develop some either corrective action or more likely, frankly, it's not a, you know, a compliance issue, but an additional supplement to their program to avoid this sort of same thing happening in the future. And there's a real cooperation between the VPP folks at OSHA and our clients' safety and health team that is a joy to watch. So this networking opportunity is a real one. And then finally, there is significant community recognition and benefit. There's a brand that is created when you get to fly the VPP flag at your work site, not to be underestimated. Obviously, I think the benefit there depends somewhat based on the industry that you're in, but a significant benefit really across industry. So a lot of pros. There are though some cons. There are some challenges, or some would say, you know, some would decide that they won't join VPP because of these cons. And I want to make you aware of them. It's not a completely rosy picture. My view is the benefits outweigh the cons, but I want to point them out to you. One, you know, you have to recognize as a VPP member, OSHA is a part of your life, always and always and forever sort of thing. They are regularly part of your health and safety program. They are either on site, you know, to make these regular renewal visits and analyses of your programs, or as I said a minute ago, you often will contact them, or if you don't contact them, but you report an incident, they will be contacted by the area office and informed about the incident, and they will contact you. So, you know, whichever way you slice it, they are a regular part of your life. And that's a challenging part of the process. But I think if you can develop a trusting relationship where you have credibility because you're being honest and transparent with the agency's VPP representatives, it will go well, but something to be aware of. Second, instituting a health and safety program that exceeds OSHA's regulations can be costly. Of course, you know, bare minimum compliance is not the name of the game with VPP, as I think Aaron pointed out. So you have to go well above and beyond compliance. And of course, there are dollars associated with that. Now, I think OSHA representatives, at least I know Dr. Michaels of the Obama administration, had done some analysis that would indicate that the costs associated with this, you know, robust health and safety management program are less than typically the costs associated with workers' comp premiums, insurance costs, and just the cost of an incident, lost time of workers, transferring workers from one job to another. So all of the ancillary costs, and these are, you know, quantifiable dollar costs associated with a less robust program where there would be a higher injury and illness rate. And that, of course, sets aside and doesn't even consider the intangible costs of a teammate or associate injury, which is a very significant cost in terms of employee morale, in terms of relationships between management and employees. So there are costs, but those costs shouldn't be looked at in a vacuum. They should be compared with the other costs that you might experience if you're not, at the level of a VPP member. Employee input with employees that are governed by a CBA. So if you have a union and you have a collective bargaining arrangement and agreement, there are confines and restrictions and rules and guardrails under the CBA about communications with employees. And when you have sort of a side-by-side existing relationship because of the VPP membership, there certainly can be challenges associated with those communications, sharing and not sharing information that is either required or not by the CBA. So a factor to be considered. And then, of course, the additional time and resources required to frequently review your programs, not just engage with the VPP OSHA folks, but your internal review of your metrics, of your programs. There's a almost constant focus on continued improvement. You can't do continued improvement without continued focus on how to improve, using incidents or near miss analyses or root cause analyses to make determinations. That takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of labor resources associated in your safety team. So certainly something to be aware of if you were to embark on a serious consideration of moving towards a VPP membership. That's about the gist of it. I think at least hits the highlights. Let me turn it over to Lindsay to talk about criteria for entering VPP and membership renewal.
Thanks, Kate. So I think, as has been made clear in the discussion so far, this is a significant undertaking to be able to meet the elements to be qualified for the VPP program. OSHA's intent in establishing this, as Aaron and Kate talked about, was to sort of recognize the best of the best, in regards to safety programs. So the bar is set high, and there are a lot of things that an employer needs to do. So I won't, we don't have the time today to go through sort of all of the nuances of qualifications and the things that need to be submitted. OSHA does provide resources through its VPP page, specifically the Voluntary Protection Programs Policies and Procedures Manual, which is a super good resource if you are thinking about, applying for VPP and want to know what the expectations are. OSHA does sort of delve into the details in that. And I will do so a little bit today, but as we are sort of confined on our time, it'll sort of be a broad overview of the main things that OSHA is going to expect and look for in both the application and then, staying in the program once you have been accepted. So this slide here shows the sort of two main things that OSHA highlights when it's looking at its applicants, and then, on the regular basis when it is reviewing the safety and health programs of participants in the VPP program. And the first is maintaining injury and illness rates below the industry average. So that is something that an employer would have to show when they apply for the VPP program. And this is also something that they would need to show on a yearly basis when the self-evaluations are submitted, and then on the reapproval basis. Injury and illness rates are really important. OSHA sees that as a big indicator of the effectiveness of a health and safety program. And so that's something they look very closely at when they're considering participation in VPP. And then the second main source of review here is the safety and health management system. And this is sort of a broad term for all of the different policies, practices, and procedures that an employer uses to maintain the health and safety of its workforce. And that safety and health management system has four main elements that OSHA is going to consider in evaluating an employer for VPP. And that's management, leadership, and employee involvement, worksite analysis, hazard prevention and control, and safety and health training. And we'll talk a little bit about these things, but again, we're going to do sort of a general overview. So before getting into the next slide, before getting into the specific, application requirements, these are sort of the expectations that OSHA lays out for anyone who would either apply or be participating in the VPP program. And I think some of them are somewhat self-explanatory, but I did want to highlight a few of them to review today. So as to employee support for VPP, the application does require that employers demonstrate employee support for entry into VPP, as well as employee knowledge that the employer is taking the step to apply for VPP, and what that entails. Applicants and participants in VPP are also expected to maintain employee inclusion in this process, not only the VPP application process, but also in the development and implementation of the actual safety and health programs. So that's one of the things that OSHA is going to be looking for in the application, as well as in continuing to review once the employer has been, does qualify for VPP and recognized in VPP. And I think particularly, Kate noted the union aspect of this. For unionized work sites, the union must support VPP to meet the program's requirements. And if the union withdraws its support, this could actually lead to the employer becoming disqualified for VPP. And if that happens, either OSHA would ask the employer to withdraw, or they might be terminated from the program. So I think that's sort of an important thing to have in mind. The employee inclusion and union inclusion part of this is really significant. As to OSHA history, OSHA will review the applicant's history, specifically interactions with OSHA related to inspections and abatement that have occurred within the prior 60 days of the application. And what they're looking for here is really just really good faith efforts to comply with OSHA requirements, to work with OSHA, and get those abatement measures completed. Protection of whistleblower rights. This is something that is required of every employer under Section 11C of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, but there are really specific requirements for those that participate in VPP, including, basic agreement to protect whistleblower rights, the training provided to managers to ensure that they understand whistleblower protections and enforce whistleblower protections, and then also posting literature on whistleblower rights in the workplace. And then finally, I thought that the outreach portion is really important, because there is an expectation, once you are qualified for VPP and are recognized as being a part of VPP, there is this expectation that because you are a model of safety and health, you are going out into the community, into the industry, to others within the industry, and sharing best practices. And that is a requirement of the program as well. And what OSHA looks for in that sense is, presentations at health and safety conferences or meeting, taking advantages of opportunities to share best practices with your peers in the industry, and then the ability and willingness to mentor other work sites and taking that step to mentor other work sites in health and safety. So going into the specific application requirements, as I said, there are a number of application requirements, a number of things that OSHA expects the employer to provide information on when they apply for VPP status. This is just a few of the highlights from what is required on the application. The employer is required to identify the types of work they perform and typical hazards. And that is going to be significant. Going into a couple slides, we'll talk about the on-site evaluation. OSHA is going to look for those typical hazards when they're evaluating the program. So, that is going to be an important part of the application process. Providing that injury and illness information. Again, going back to that first slide in this section, the injury and illness rates are really significant to OSHA. OSHA history. The thing I want to note here is that employers who have open inspections or investigations or contests that are pending are not going to be able to apply for VPP during that process. Also employers in SVEP, the Severe Violator Enforcement Program, or SVEP, or those that have affirmed willful violations in that 60 months prior to the application submission, are also not going to be qualified. So there are some strings attached to the OSHA history, depending on sort of what the status of things are at that time. And then the other thing that actually I'll highlight on the next slide, so if we go to the next slide, there are a number of assurances, what OSHA classifies as assurances, that it expects employers who are applying for VPP to provide. And these are sort of just affirmations that certain things will be done, certain requirements will be met per the application process, and then eventual, if the employer is qualified and the application is approved, eventual participation in VPP. And that just a list of those assurances is shown on the left side of this slide. And then OSHA is also going to look very closely at those 4 elements that I mentioned prior in the safety and health management system. And so they're going to be looking for documentation of how each of these elements is met, and then policies, practices, and actual implementation of how each of these things is met. And I'm just going to kind of provide one example to illustrate this. For like the management, leadership, and employee involvement element, OSHA will be looking for how management demonstrates its commitment to safety for its employees and contractors. This could be things like establishing a clear process for communication, providing specific examples of how management has responded to employee safety concerns and complaints in a timely manner in the past, or making safety and health performance a part of manager evaluations. These are all things that can sort of feed into that first element, and that OSHA would be looking for examples and documentation of along with the VPP application. All right, next slide. So the application is completed, information documentation is provided to OSHA. OSHA is then going to come on site, or OSHA representatives are going to then come on site to conduct an on-site evaluation. And this is a very thorough evaluation of the site. It is going to be conducted by a team of OSHA staff, but this is not an enforcement. It's not an inspection, it's not an enforcement effort. It'll probably seem and feel pretty similar to an on-site inspection, but it's going to be even broader than that, because they're going to be looking at everything on site. They're going to want to do a walkthrough of the site to look for conditions, physical conditions in the work environment, as well as identifying any uncontrolled hazard or hazardous conditions that they see while walking through the work site and observing the processes at the work site. It's also going to entail a document review, there were things identified in the application. OSHA is going to ask to review those policies, practices, those injury and illness records. They're going to ask to review all of that documentation associated with those things highlighted in the application, to verify that these things are in place, that they are being implemented, and that they are effective. And another way that they're also going to assess implementation of and effectiveness of the programs and procedures within the health and safety management system is by interviewing folks at the site. So they're going to want to interview multiple people, including managers and supervisors, as well as your maintenance personnel, record keepers, hourly employees, all of those individuals. They're going to want to interview them and get information related to these programs and procedures. Generally, the on-site evaluation is going to be commenced within 9 months of accepting the VPP application. But of course, we can't really hold to that deadline necessarily. It could take longer. I know during COVID that has definitely been the case, especially with restrictions on doing on-site inspections generally. And this is sort of, I think, a lower priority than some of those ongoing on-site inspections. So it can definitely take longer than that period, but that's, generally what OSHA likes to stick to. And then after, if your application is accepted, on-site evaluation goes well, and you are admitted into VPP, there is an expectation of yearly submission of a self-evaluation. And this is going to be due by February 15th of each year. And it's really similar to what OSHA did during the application process. The self-evaluation is the employer now going through and taking a really careful look at written programs, at the physical conditions of the site, talking with employees and managers, reviewing injury and illness data, all those things that OSHA kind of did in the application stage, employers are supposed to be doing on a yearly basis, and then submitting the self-evaluation to establish that it's been completed. And then beyond just the yearly submission of the self-evaluation, on the next slide, we have just a brief review of the reapproval process. So, when you apply, it is sort of an extended process of OSHA reviewing the application and doing the on-site evaluation. And then OSHA does sort of reevaluate and review those same sorts of things on a 3 to 5 year basis to maintain participation in the program. OSHA is reviewing those yearly self-evaluations as well. They're reviewing the information that's provided through those self-evaluations, would follow up with the employer if any issues have been identified in those self-evaluations that the employer needs to address. But then the reapproval process is really, again, that significant undertaking by OSHA to review where things stand and make sure that the employer is still meeting the qualifications for whatever recognition the employer has, whether it be STAR or merit recognition. And during this process, OSHA will identify any areas that are in need of improvement and provide follow-up actions as necessary. I just want to briefly note here that if OSHA does identify issues during this process that need to be corrected for the employer to continue to be qualified, it's not sort of an automatic thing where the employer will be kicked out of the program or be asked to withdraw. There are, pathways in place that OSHA can use, like a 1-year conditional continued participation in the STAR program that allows the employer some time to address those issues and, hopefully meet the qualification requirements again and stay in the program. And then this last slide here, just sort of some broad tips to try to avoid some of the pitfalls that an employer could face in maintaining its position in the program. A big thing here, and I think, just based on my discussion in the prior slides, injury and illness data is hugely important to qualification for VPP. And so it's really important that the employer make sure it has systems in place to review injury and illness data. This is important to do whether you're in VPP or not, because OSHA could come to the site at any time to open an inspection and ask for this data. So it is important to have periodic opportunities for periodic review of injury and illness data. And then, being a part of VPP makes that even more important just because of the qualification criteria. Making sure that there's a tracking system for deficiencies that are identified during the employer's self-evaluation, so that I can go back and make sure it is correcting those issues either in advance of OSHA reaching out about anything that's identified in the self-evaluation, or in advance of OSHA actually coming to do the reapproval process. Reviewing the safety program against the safety and health deficiencies, again, making sure those written policies, procedures, and programs are updated to reflect correction to any deficiencies and determining whether any changes are needed. And then finally, I think, just kind of important to keep in mind, there is a cooperative relationship here, and that's really great and a definite benefit to the employer, but an employer should also be cognizant of the extent of transparency if there does come a time when OSHA comes on site to do an inspection because of an incident or a complaint or something like that. It's important to work cooperatively with OSHA, but as the employer, you also want to make sure that, there are limitations on OSHA's authority, and you want to be mindful of that in cooperating in any, inspection or investigation of the site. With that, I know we are getting close on time, so I will throw it back over to Aaron to talk about the impact of change in administration.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I will, I'll keep this fairly brief. I think the question is, when it comes to politics, is whether the particular administration is down with VPP or interested in furthering that type of recognition. And so during the Obama administration, there was, I don't know if decided would be the right word, but there was an apparent it was less enthusiastic adoption or maintenance of the VPP type programs. And so in essence, and I think we've talked about this in some of the kind of year end and look back forecasting webinars that we do in January. But you typically see with the change of administrations from whether it's Democratic or Republican, it tends to be perhaps a little bit less of interest in VPP in Democratic administrations, and perhaps more of a focus in Republican administrations, which is consistent with that kind of bouncing back and forth between a focus on enforcement and a focus on compliance assistance. The thought being that when you're focusing more on compliance assistance, you want to recognize those that are doing things the right way. When you're focusing on enforcement, you have things like we saw during the Obama administration. So if you can see on the slide here, if there was a certain type of incident at a VPP site, the regional administrators were required to automatically send an intent to terminate notice rather than beginning or participating in meetings to discuss any of the concerns that were possibly present at the work site. So, the sorts of things that would result in issuance of a notice to terminate, fatality or catastrophe, failing to report a fatality, occurrence of willful violations, or placement of an employer in the severe violator and program enforcement program, or SVEP, as Lindsay mentioned. During the Obama administration, you had the national office was included in the determination of whether to bounce an employer out of the program or allow them to try to remain in. So it was more of a top-down kind of oversight of that process and management of membership, if you will. During the Trump administration, we saw the primary events that would result in potentially being removed from the programs limited to fatalities and catastrophes and failing to report fatalities. If either of those things occurred, then the member's status would change to inactive pending investigation. In the event that citations were issued, then there would typically be a meeting with the member company or member employer to collect that additional information and continue that evaluation into whether they are able to or should remain within the program. And at that point, then determine whether to issue the intent to terminate notice, and doing so without further participation or input from the national office, allowing those decisions primarily to be made at the regional level. In the event that the folks in the local and regional area determined that it was appropriate to terminate membership in the program, they would then give that member the option to either withdraw or to be issued the ITT. And then the participant nonetheless retained the right to appeal that decision. It remains to be seen. I don't know that we've heard or that OSHA has staked out a new position, whether it will go back to what we saw under the Obama-Biden administration. I assume that we're going to see some change, perhaps one that maybe expands the number of reasons back to the kind of the broader things that might trigger an ITT. But I'm hopeful and will be interested to see if perhaps OSHA in the next 3 years or so, perhaps takes a little bit more of a measured approach before immediately bouncing employers out of the program. So that's something we'll be tracking and keeping our eye on, and we'll be sure to cover that in the next annual look back and look ahead in January of 2022, and perhaps sooner. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all and cover the last piece.
Sure. Okay, this is Kate, everyone. And I know we're past the 2 o'clock mark, so I'll keep my remarks brief here too, but we wanted to at least make you aware, for those of you on the webinar who are not, make you aware of some other of OSHA's cooperative programs. Most well-known probably is SHARP, the Safety and Health Achievement Recognition Program. A lot of people consider this to be sort of the equivalent of VPP for small employers. But as we learned earlier, a lot of small employers are in VPP. You don't have to be in SHARP if you're a small employer as opposed to VPP. But SHARP is specifically designed for small employers. Those are employers who have 250 employees or less at the particular facility that would like to become a SHARP member. And also you cannot have more than 500 employees corporate-wide. So there's a severe size limitation associated with SHARP, or a clear size limitation, I should say. In addition to that size limitation, the big, I guess I'd say, difference between VPP and SHARP is with SHARP, you actually must participate in an on-site consultation program that is offered by OSHA. Some of you on in the webinar may have participated, called on this program that's available, not just as a SHARP member, but often OSHA will suggest that you rely on this resource, this on-site consultation program available through OSHA. For SHARP membership, you have to participate in the consultation program. And the way the consultation program works is basically, first of all, the consultation program is not a program that is filled with OSHA employees. OSHA actually sets the program up, but it's through a local university or other resources that are available in your local area. Those resources are health and safety experts, and they go through this process to become one of the resources available through the consultation program. What happens is an employer who is interested in joining SHARP will reach out to the consultation resource that is local to their facility and set up the program. The program essentially consists of something that looks and feels a bit like a typical inspection. A consultation resource advocate or person, I'm not sure what they're called, will come on site, will do an opening conference with you that will scope out the hazard analysis that will be done by the consultation program. That analysis will essentially be a sort of a wall-to-wall evaluation of your health and safety programs and your compliance. After the opening, and a lot of this is sort of sketched out between the employer and the consultation program in advance of their on-site visit. Then they'll do this opening conference on site. Then they will do a walk around, just like you see with an inspection, and they will identify, any issues that are hazards. And those hazards are not limited to just issues for which there's a regulatory requirement, like lotto or machine guarding or ladders or, the plethora of OSHA regulatory compliance requirements, but also any hazards for which there is not a specific regulation, but one that, for instance, could be cited under OSHA's general duty clause. So they'll identify those hazards. They will then do a closing conference with you to sort of give you first line assessment of what they've identified. Then they will go back home and they will write up a detailed report that essentially identifies all of those hazards. What you as the employer's obligation, your obligation is to essentially address all of the hazards that are identified in this report by the consultation program. If you if you respond to that report and address all those hazards, you get to be a SHARP member essentially. I mean, there's some other, important pieces, but we probably don't have time to go into those. But there are at least some points identified on this slide, like maintaining injury and illness rates below the national average, and maintaining a health and safety management program. So those are components of being in SHARP, but the main part is going through this consultation program and agreeing to address the issues, concerns, hazards that have been identified. Now, one very important thing to know about the SHARP program, those hazards that are identified through the consultation program are not shared, at least as part of the program, they are not shared with the OSHA enforcement folks. They're not shared with the local area office. However, and this is really important to understand, there are a couple of exceptions to that, and you should be very aware if you're thinking of going into SHARP of those exceptions. One, if you fail to eliminate or, in some fashion, address the hazards that are identified by the consultation program in the time period that is worked out with the program. So, if it takes 3 months and that's agreed to with the consultation program, then you have those 3 months to do the hazard correction and corrective action. However, if you don't do that, then, free opportunity or, commitment to not identify this issue to the OSHA enforcement program is off. And the program can and would identify that hazard to the enforcement folks in the area office. So it's critical if you go into this to make a commitment to yourself that you're going to address the issues that have been identified. The second situation where the consultation program would have the right to inform the area office of the hazard is if they identify the hazard as an imminent threat to the health and safety of your employees. If you have an imminent hazard of a potential serious threat, life, limb threat to your employees, then again, all bets are off and the consultation program can, and in that situation probably would identify the hazard to the enforcement folks. So it's not a complete protection that you have. However, I will share that in the entirety of my career, which has been quite some time, I've not known of any situation. I have known of some situations where a SHARP member or entity that is attempting to become a member has been concerned about this potential, but I've not seen it actually happen. OSHA says it's a rare case. I don't have statistics on how often it happens, but I do think working with your in-house counsel or outside counsel before you go into the SHARP program or attempt to go into the SHARP program and do this consultation, it would be a good idea. So that's SHARP, the on-site consultation program, sort of in a nutshell. A couple of other programs. Oh, well, yeah, benefits, the obvious benefits to SHARP. When you're certified as a SHARP member, you are granted the same exemption from programmed inspections for up to 2 years that you are granted under VPP. Again, nothing related to unprogrammed inspections. Those will and do happen regardless of your membership in SHARP. The exemption though, and the SHARP membership can be extended up to 3 years as long as you apply in the right period of time and you meet the criteria. So you can have a pretty extended period when you are not subject to programmed inspections under SHARP, as long as you continue to maintain the commitments and the criteria that are identified by SHARP. Similar drawbacks, frequent OSHA presence. You have to be ready to and absolutely sure about your commitment of investment of resources that you're going to invest in a health and safety management program to if you want to join the SHARP program. Okay, just to wrap up, a couple of other programs that we want to make you at least aware of. There is the OSPP, which is the OSHA Strategic Partnership Program. This is a program, a cooperative program between not typically an employer or a company and OSHA, but a group of employers and industry. It will include typically union representation where there's organized workforces within that industry. Basically, like the Alliance program that I'm going to talk about in a minute, it is where basically an industry or a group of employers work with their employees, with union representatives, and with OSHA on a particular aspect of, health and safety, where you identify hazards, where you share resources, where you develop basically systems, management systems to address the hazards that have been identified. The partnerships are, sorry, my screen gets covered when the chat goes off, so I can't really see our slide, but basically the partnerships are incorporated into written agreements that have specific goals, specific timetables, specific elements, and that agreement essentially is the Bible for the OSPP. The partnerships, though, unlike the other programs, VPP and SHARP, they do not result in any exemptions from inspection. So don't expect that you won't have OSHA show up at your door for a programmed inspection, even if you are part of the OSPA. Next program that I want to mention, Aaron, you want to switch the slides? A couple of others, the Alliance program. I represented clients in the Alliance program in a number of situations, a number of occasions. Again, there's a formal agreement that incorporates the terms of the Alliance. It's a formal partnership. There are a lot of, just like with VPP and with SHARP, there's a lot of kind of branding associated with this. It's really considered pretty cool to be partnering with OSHA in an Alliance program. I have seen Alliance programs that, from my perspective, are a lot of fluff and not a lot of stuff that actually is done in the way of health and safety. And I've seen a lot of alliances that actually really dig into some particular continual, significant health and safety issues in that industry and really make headway in developing compliance tools and management systems that like I said, make great headway into addressing and reducing those hazards. So it kind of depends on the people involved in the program on behalf of industry, as well as employees, as well as OSHA. But they can be really beneficial from a health and safety perspective, and they certainly provide a really fabulous opportunity for development of a relationship, a positive relationship with the OSHA national office, and also with, in some ancillary form with the local area offices. Everybody knows if you have an alliance with OSHA, and you can tout that as a benefit. And I think it helps with your employee relations. So there are real benefits. It does have its limitations because it is very specifically defined and outlined in this cooperative agreement that is set forward at the beginning of the relationship. Finally, the OSHA Challenge Program. This is basically sort of a 3-part program that is used, I think, for the most part, to develop a health and safety management program. Essentially, the program is designed to help participants develop at the time, a non-existent management program. So a comprehensive I2P2 that will help guide health and safety going forward. There are basically 3 steps. The first step is you kind of work with the agency through the challenge program to learn the elements of a health and safety program. After you do that, the second stage is implementation of your health and safety program. And then the third stage is monitoring and oversight of the existing health and safety program and improvements made to the management system. So that is that is challenge. If you don't have an existing health and safety management program, it's a cooperative program that you ought to think about. You don't get any benefit in the way of exemption from programmed inspections, but still it's a nice tool to use to develop a program that you know would satisfy OSHA and that you know would, I think, provide some real intangible benefits associated with relationship building at OSHA. With that, I think we are concluding our program.
We are.
We want to remind you that we do these webinars regularly. Today's was on, the VPP program, but Erin just put up the slide that shows what we have coming up next. In early September, we're going to do a webinar on electronic record keeping. We'll do something in October on, this is going to be a really interesting one, I think, on OSHA issues associated with acquisitions and divestitures. So if your company is doing any acquisitions, certainly join us if you can for that, and we'll try to end up the year talking about PSM and EPA's RMP program. But in between those, Erin, Lindsay, myself, and our whole Conn Maciel team are available to you to, chat about any particular issue, no charge, just give us a call. We're happy to talk to you about any OSHA issue that you might be facing. Erin, let me kind of turn it back to you in case you have any other wrap-up comments that you'd like to make.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, nothing gets you in the holiday spirit like a PSM webinar. So hopefully everyone will join us for that one right before Thanksgiving. Just a new end slide. We encourage folks to sign up for the entire series and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you get an email then whenever new recordings become available. There's also access to a whole library of prior programs if you just can't get enough, or you're trying to fall asleep and you're having trouble doing that. Please sign up and subscribe to the channel. That'll help us create more good content for you all. Don't forget about our COVID-19 task force as well. We've got a section on our website that covers all things COVID. We're going to be updating that in the near future, include some new links and some new information. I think we've covered all the questions as far as I can see. So with that, I appreciate everybody's patience and sticking with us as we went a little bit long, but hopefully it was helpful content. And or feel like Kate said, please reach out to any of us with any questions that we did not get a chance to answer today. With that, we hope everyone has a good rest of the week. Stay safe, be well, and we look forward to you joining us for our next program. Thank you.